You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Lisa back.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Back on stage at Festival of the Force. We're here with Lynn. We're going to talk all about all kinds of stuff that you've been involved with. But the first thing I want to ask about is, and I just pointed at the picture as we were walking through the crowd, Andor. Who here has seen season 2 of Andor? Okay. So you may be aware of a little character in a wheelchair in a hospital that looks a little bit like E.T., who was just hilarious. Lynn, you were involved in that character.
Yeah, so as some of you may well know, there were 3 grannies in Andor 1. They were in the background. We were shot at Blackpool on a prom in the pouring rain. So I was involved in one of those grannies, and they decided that they hadn't really had enough recognition for who they were as characters, so they brought one back in Andor 2. Now, actually, I wasn't cast as one of the 2 puppeteers that was doing the granny, but as fate would have it, the puppeteer that was fell ill, and therefore I was asked in. So she's on a wheelchair, literally as I'm sitting here, but there's a hole in the back of the wheelchair. There's a tiny skateboard on the back of the wheelchair. Can I get up and demo?
Absolutely.
So basically, I'm here, and my arm goes up as high as possible in her head to operate her. And the actress, I had to be as close to the chair as was physically possible. It was pretty uncomfortable. But she had to push the wheelchair and the puppet and me.
Wow.
So she had quite a difficult job. And then there was another puppeteer, Wim Booth, who was on the face and gave her a voice. And the 2 of us I could hear her in my ear, and we just worked together and hopefully brought a very sweet character to life.
You really did, because you only see her for a couple of scenes, but you kind of feel, especially when she gets dumped, when Claire's off doing her thing, you kind of feel for her, because you mentioned your fellow puppeteer fell ill. It's kind of ironic she would have played, or he would have played, a character that's in a hospital. But one connection, you mentioned season 1, and there's that on Neamos, and there's that music that's associated with Neamos,
Yep.
and then there's the scene when your character, has she got a name?
No, I think she's just called Granny.
Granny's
Bless
good
her.
for me. G-R-A-N-E.
There's grannies even in Star Wars.
There is, and in the lift you can hear the music from Neamos playing like lift
You're
music.
right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So there's
That's
that nice
a cool connection.
Yeah. So when you're performing a character, and you've done many, and we'll get to them, do you kind of feel it in your bones that I think this is going to connect with people? I think people are going to dig this character.
Do you know what? I'll need to be really honest about Granny.
Sure.
She was so difficult to do because physically it was a really, really awkward position to be in. I don't think I gave it the thought of what she will be.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to really make her live as an elderly, curmudgeonly character. So hopefully that came through. So no, I would say sometimes you do, and sometimes you get it completely. You think, wow, this is gonna be something, people are gonna love, and then they don't.
Yeah.
So,
but you've had a few.
Which is the beauty.
Of course it is. I guess if we all knew, then there's no joy in the discovery of a character breaking out in that way, is there, I suppose?
Exactly.
But you were involved in Dio.
Correct.
In Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
And that always seemed to me a character that JJ really took to as a character. On Sexy Voices him, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He didn't voice him when we were doing it, but he ended up voicing it. And I think he did really connect with Dio, and he helped me find a lot of the character and the kind of sadness and strength that character has, being unloved and dumped, and then finding BB-8 and having a real friend. So for me, I was on what we call the head and the emotions of the character. So I was moving the character once, as it came, and then Robin was on a wheelbarrow type machine that kind of rolled him in or took him out of shot. So we had to kind of work together. I needed to know what he was going to do and what direction he was going to take, because the last thing, Dio's head could do a 360. It had, in fact, as a droid, it had so much emotion and ability to get out of him that I needed to know what Robin was going to do, because if he swung off and I'm swinging the head in a different direction, then it becomes disconnected, and you're trying to make it feel like it is a whole and total character.
And it's interesting you mentioned the emotion of that character, because he does feel like, he almost feels like he could be in Toy Story, because he's been abandoned. There's that little sorrowful element to him. And he's partnered up in that film with BB-8. Obviously, Brian's out there, and with Dave. And Brian and Dave had to work very carefully to make sure the body matches the head and all that stuff. And you're the same. So it's two very kind of, in the world of droids, emotional characters paired up together. It was kind of sweet as well in the film.
Yeah, and I think it empowers BB-8, because he's then taking, this sad and slightly battered, obviously damaged droid under his wing and lets him know it'll be okay. But you say about with JJ, one of the fun days is in the film, Ray mends his squeaky wheel.
Yes.
And so we had a bit of a chat about it, and I was making the squeaky wheel noise because it always helps, and going backwards and forwards and in, and kind of somehow it just tickled JJ, and he was in hysterics that day. And for me, that was a really warm moment to know, because he could see me, he could see Robin, he knows how the whole thing works, and yet the character had connected with him, to bring laughter and joy, and that's...
Is that a fun moment then? Because I know you guys do show and tell, and you'll work out little skits if you like, and the director may or may not take to it. But the way you've described what you've just said feels like that was very much in the moment there and then on set.
It was, and he kind of gave me a direction of, you want to go, you don't want to go,
Yeah.
And I took it perhaps to the comedy level, and he just enjoyed it, so that's what ended up.
What other characters did you work on episode 9?
Oh, I've brought my own crib sheet because I never remember which one's in which one.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
So I did Vexus the Snake.
Yeah.
I was involved in the head of Vexus the Snake, which involved, I don't know, I think there must have been 10 of us on it altogether. It was massive.
Yeah, that's the snake underground on Pisana that Ray heals when he gets injured.
And the others are mainly characters within the background. So I would be doing the RC on the face of a performer who is in a full suit with an animatronic face. They have, as you may or may not know, very little vision, very little fresh air, and I'm on an earpiece. Having been a suit performer myself, I've got a great understanding and sympathy for what they need to do to bring a character to life, and I'm working in tandem with them on their face to bring the correct emotions that they are physically showing.
Hello there, you beautiful people. This is Steve Evans, Senior Design Director for Star Wars at Hasbro, and you are listening to, you guessed it, Fantha Tracks.
I'm always fascinated by the puppeteering side and the creature performance side, and what you've just said. You've done both disciplines, so is that, I guess it's not essential because there must be some people who don't, but is it more useful to you to have done one and then be able to connect it to the other?
Definitely. I've done a lot of suit performance, and if you have someone in your ear that has no idea of the weight of the costume, the physical restrictions, and visually you don't see much, so But this character has to look in the scene as if it has all those senses. So the person who's in their ear is going, there's a person at 1:15 on your right, so that they could maybe just do a turn and, you know, a nod, and it gives them the ability to see what's around them and to interact and react. Otherwise, they're just a guy in the suit walking around. You know, you really need to bring an energy to it.
And is that through repetition, or is that through a connection with the partners in that somebody can be watching you do it remotely and go, just another 2 degrees to the left? Or where do you live in that character? Do you have to know your beats and know where you're going? Or do you get to a point with your fellow performers that you know you've got it? If there's a guy to your left, you know you can look to your left.
So I think there's different ways of doing it. Some people in the suit like to pace it out and like to know 5 steps and I'll walk into a wall, so I only ever take 4 steps in that direction. 2 steps to the right and I'll be at a barrow. So some people like to have that mental awareness.
Yeah.
Other people totally rely on the person in their ear. And the person who is in their ear doing their face and guiding them is also watching a monitor of the shot. So you give your performer, the camera's coming to you, you are in, 4 steps, someone on your left, you know, so you can help them, and then you'll say, and you're out of shot, because they don't need to keep that going for the full shot if they're not in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just giving them the perimeters of what's around them and where we're starting, where we're finishing.
So when, in the realm of characters you've done, and you've done many, is there one that you look at and think, that just worked, the work we put in, the design, because it goes all the way back to somebody like, I don't know, Jake Lunk-Davis sketching a creature on his notepad, all the way through to you guys bringing it to life on the screen, and then even beyond that, ILM might do stuff, the editors make choices and such. But where you sit, is there a character that you look at and go, I wasn't 100% sure that was going to work, but actually it worked a treat?
I think it would be Granny.
That's brilliant that it's the most recent one.
Only because it was so uncomfortable. I could almost not see the beauty through the pain, which is ridiculous, because I didn't have a monitor. So I'm getting information from Wim about, you know, what it looks like. So I have to say, I didn't think that would come to what it did.
And when you have you seen you've watched Andor? No? So,
no, not yet.
Spoiler alert, it's really good. It's really good. So there'll be people here today when we've finished here and you go back to your table that will come and they'll see the picture of Clea with Granny and they'll be like, wow, that's you. What kind of joy does that give you when people connect with the character that you've brought to life?
So it gives me immense pleasure, I have to say. This is only my second convention, and the first one I did, you were there.
Yep.
And I do in Rise of Skywalker, I did a character, Albrecht, who is in it for a minuscule moment, but I know he's doing something quite important. But it is just a moment. And I did get someone who came up to my table and said, this is my favourite character in Star Wars. And I said, seriously? He's only on screen for about 20 or 30 seconds.
He's the monkey that fixes Kylo Ren's helmet when he puts all the gold bits in.
And that just made my day, because I don't think, I don't realise how things touch people.
Yeah.
And I think Granny's given me a bit of insight. But that guy at that convention, you think it can be a really small thing, and somehow it connects with somebody. And if what we do makes people feel happy, or they feel joy, or they just kind of connect to something, then it totally makes it worthwhile.
In terms of performance and characters and creatures and so on and so forth, what was your starting point when you started out and thought, this is the career path I want to follow? What was it? Something you saw as a kid? How did you get into it?
So I was brought up in Glasgow. I always did dance as a kid. I was going to, I was at kind of leaving school level. I was going to go into nursing. I was in a local contemporary dance group. And I asked my mum how she would feel if I became a dancer. It wasn't something that people from my area did. I had no one to follow. We didn't have a huge amount of money. I'm not going to bore you with a sob story. I got a grant. I trained to be a dancer. I worked as a dancer for about 15 years. And in between dance contracts where I was working, I either worked in opera or I worked film and television in historic pieces like Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah.
My side hustle was getting into a suit of whatever character it was, Postman Pat, and opening a Woolworths somewhere and coming home, and that was extra money for me. So I always did things in suits. And then coming towards the end of my dance career, I'd already been starting to think, I don't want to teach, I don't want to choreograph, I don't want to be in charge, I still want to perform in some way, and was very lucky enough to be cast in a film. I auditioned in London, which was being shot in LA, which was called Buddy, where I played a juvenile gorilla. They needed an extra puppeteer on the baby, and they asked me if I'd lend a hand. I was like, yeah, sure. Light bulb moment. I've got transferable skills. I have huge understanding how things move. And so I kind of trained on the job and transitioned neatly from being a movement person to being a puppeteer.
That's brilliant. From your movement to giving something else movement. We had Hugh Spites on earlier, and Hugh was a dancer as well.
I know, I've only just found out today.
Yeah, and so just taking his skills and parlaying that into a Gamma guard, great big bulky thing. But to him it was like, yep, makes all the sense in the world.
But also I just think, sometimes, and I want to encourage young people of today to know you seriously can do anything. If you let people know what you want to do and you show enthusiasm, are ready to learn and work, you'll do whatever you want to do. Because this wasn't on my agenda, I can tell you. Growing up, if somebody had said to me, you'll perform with the Muppets, you'll be in Star Wars, you'll be sat chatting to people in York, miles away from either my aspirations, dreams,
It's brilliant that the two things kind of came together for you, because the way you say that eureka moment, laying it out, it makes all the sense. But when you're living it like yourself, it's not two things that you would connect. So.
No, not at all. And you do find... So I work now mainly with, at the moment, with Neil Scanlon, Creatures Department, and puppeteers / suit performers. We kind of think as suit performers also as puppeteers, because they're just puppeteering something with their full physicality. So either of those, either come into it having wanting to do it from a young age, so having a real good interest in puppeteering and what things on television and film are puppeteers, and a great understanding of that. Yeah. Or you get people that come in through the side doors which have had an acting training and are bringing that, or a dance or movement training.
Yeah.
So it makes for a really eclectic mix of people.
And no two people have got the same background. Your background is so unique to anybody else's.
Yeah, and it goes to make a more well-rounded group and a better ability to kind of channel your specialist background into what ends up on screen. And that's taken into account, I think, when we're cast with what we end up doing. Like, physically, keep going back to Granny because she's the most recent thing, physically, some of the puppeteers, the male puppeteers, could not have done it, because physically they couldn't have fitted, it would have been wrong. So we need different sizes, shapes, all kinds of people to be able to fulfill the brief of whatever the character has to do, or wherever you have to be hidden to enable you to do the character.
When you're at an event like this, you're looking back at what you've done before. Presumably you're working on stuff now that you can't talk about, but in a couple of years you'll be able to come to a place like this and tell everybody what you did, like Granny a couple of years ago. Is there something you're working on now that you're excited by? You can't talk about it, but that excites you, enthuses you, makes you think, I think this could be something that people really get into, without giving anything away.
Yes. I mean, I'd love to be able to say, because I'm so excited about it, but I just can't. But it might be connected to a galaxy somewhere far, far away.
Oh, that's a nice little hint. Well, we look forward to you coming and talking about that here or wherever it might be. But for now, can we have a big round of applause for Lynn, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Right, back on stage at Festival of the Force. Hope everybody's well. The room's filling up very nicely. This is good. And Paul's doing his exercises.
Yeah, I have to get the body working at this time in the morning.
How are you?
Well, I'm upright and breathing, as is always can be expected, I hope, at this time in the day, but very well other than that. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I've got a room full of people and a Star Wars guest to talk to, so I'm happy.
Fantastic.
You've been doing events and conventions and such signings for a long, long time.
Since I was a child, yes.
Pretty much. Have you ever done an event in York before?
I do, some of you might contradict me. I don't think I have, actually. It's certainly a beautiful city. I think I have been to York before, but I don't think I've done an event as such here before. No.
Yeah. You're well-travelled. I mean, globally, obviously galactically as well, but globally well-travelled with events. Where, not to say that York isn't the greatest place you've ever been, but what, in your estimation so far, was the one place you go, I'm so glad Star Wars took me there?
Well, the one place I wouldn't go is Tatooine again, because I seem to die every time I go there. So it's one of the places I really wouldn't go. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we've been so lucky with all the conventions worldwide over the last 45 years we've been doing this for. And occasionally my wife will come with me. I don't know why she didn't come to York, actually, because she loves York. Hawaii she came to. I don't know why. Hawaii seemed a good place to go. Bradford she didn't come to. I don't know. Again, I have no reason to know why she didn't come. But, yeah, I mean, we've been so lucky. And the interesting thing, I mean, this sounds a bit creepy, but fans worldwide are pretty wonderful. It's always charming to meet you guys, and you say such delightful things to us, which is wonderful for us. And then you give us money. So what is not to like about doing conventions for the last 45 years?
Very true, very true. When you were offered the role back in the day, what was a young Paul Blake up to at that time?
I was desperate for any job, I think. I was working, I got the job through Anthony Daniels, who was C-3PO, and we were working together on a thing for the BBC, which some of you, you're all too young in this audience, but some of you might remember Jack and Ori, the kids' TV series, and we were doing a Christmas special of Jack and Ori, and when we finished the show, he rang me up at home about 2 or 3 weeks later and said, I'm doing this movie, and the director said, do I know any really, really cheap actors? And I said, I'm your man. So it's Anthony I've got to thank for the serendipity of doing the film, and of course George, who was kind enough to give me the job.
How, I've got to ask, you mentioned Anthony, and it makes me smile, because he always plays, looking back, like he was kind of really cool and a bit bemused by it all. But when he called you, a friend who he'd worked with before, to say, you want to come onto this thing, how did he sell you on that? How did he kind of put it to you?
Well, I think he seemed more convinced than anyone else about its success. I think he was heavily involved in it, like obviously Harrison and Carrie were. Harrison not so much, because Harrison in those days, in 76, was a virtual unknown. He'd only done one major film before that, and that was American Graffiti, and that's how George knew of Harrison. And in fact, I think it's fairly well known that Harrison was reading in Hollywood for everyone else who was auditioning for Han Solo at the time, and after a month of intensive auditions, George and the rest of the crew couldn't decide who was really suitable. But it was Hollywood's top elite who they saw for it, but nobody that George thought was entirely suitable until someone said, well, what about Harrison? He's been reading in all these last few weeks, and he was terrific as Han Solo. And George said, yeah, I think you're right. I think he should be the guy to play the character. And the story is that Harrison, as you may know, in his part-time work, was a carpenter, and he was working on the roof of a lady in California doing the shingles on the roof. And he got the call from George, and she's still waiting for the roof to be finished to this day. So that's how he got the job.
Lucky for her, or sadly not lucky for her, he never went back and finished it. What a shame. So you're on that set now. I mean, Star Wars was what was it, $10 million budget, which you look back now and laugh because there's TV episodes that cost that much now. But then, even then, for a sci-fi film, it was a significant budget. It was a gamble for Fox. Yes. Were you on set? Were you protected from that? Were you aware of that? Where did you and your fellow performers sit with that kind of pressure?
It's a good question because generally, especially if you're doing a minor part in a movie, you very rarely get to know what the hell's going on, least of all have any idea about what the movie will end up like. Even if you're paying or producing a movie, there is no guarantee that it's ever going to be successful. There's a great book called Adventures in the Screen Trade about how all the mythology of movies, like what makes a successful movie, is not true. One of the myths is that, if you get all the stars of the day, whoever it is at that moment who is the highest in the ascendancy of their work, and you get them in the film, that's going to sell the movie for you. History and statistics don't bear that out. Very few major stars have been in the next blockbuster or the next exceedingly successful movie than the one they suddenly became incredibly well known in. So a lot of the mythology about how you make a great film, or even a film that's partially remembered, isn't true. But I think George had to be convinced that Star Wars was going to be successful. Otherwise, that would have been the last you ever heard of George Lucas, had it not been successful, because the $10 million, as you say, was a hell of a lot of money in '76. And so he was intensely pressured on a daily basis about getting the scenes done. And because the original script was like a telephone directory, it had so many scenes that George insisted on shooting, because he was so involved in it and its creation. He'd been working on it for 2 to 3 years prior to it being made. So for him, and for Harrison, and to a degree for Carrie and Mark, it had to be a huge success. For all the rest of it, we couldn't care less. We were on to the next job straight away, because that was an actor's life at the time.
This is Matt Ferguson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's interesting you say that about George wanting to film everything, because I think people look back through history now, and obviously they won the Academy Award for the editing on Star Wars, but George always would rather refer to himself as an editor, get it all in, get it down, get in the editing room, pull the films together. So it's interesting you say that he just wanted to film as much as he could. Yes, absolutely.
And he had a lot of stress because his wife was an editor and she wanted to edit the movie. They had a lot of argument about that. So that was a degree of stress that he had, apart from the day-to-day filming of the thing. And of course the money men were on his back all the time to make sure that cash was going to be realised in the most successful way. In fact, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, the producers, not so much Gary Kurtz, because Gary was a friend of George's and knew Harrison's value, but the other execs involved wanted to get rid of Harrison even into the first 2 or 3 weeks of filming, because they thought that he wouldn't sell the film until they eventually were shown the rushes and realised that he was damn good in it and that it was going to have that sort of credibility to it. But they took a lot of convincing. Money talks.
It certainly does. And it's interesting, a number of points you make there, but one that strikes me is that Harrison's character, Han, doesn't come into the film until 45 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
You're the first character that gives him any grief.
Yeah.
You know, he's this little conversation parlay thing with Ben and Luke, and Chewie's his sidekick, and then you turn, well, he dodges the stormtroopers, and then you turn up and give him that moment. You, or Harrison, couldn't have known that his character would go on to be such an iconic character within Star Wars and sci-fi, and you're the character that gives him the first challenge. When did that become evident to you? Was it when you went and saw the film? Was it the reaction to it? When did you realise that that's actually a really pivotal moment?
Extreme serendipity, I think. I mean, as far as I was concerned, my scenes would have been the ones shot with the original Jabba the Hutt, who was an actor called Declan Mulholland. So we filmed all those scenes in front of the Millennium Falcon, which was a painting on the wall. In fact, it was 2 flats, beautifully painted. And in the movie, you can't tell them from the real thing. They're so well done. With a ramp, a real ramp going up the middle, which you walk up and fall off the back. That's how cheap the original Star Wars sets were. So I thought those scenes are going to be the ones that I may have been in. I had no idea that I'd end up in the movie because it was such a tiny 2 minutes, 3 minutes worth. Although in the course of any film, that's quite a long time if you're not playing the lead. So I thought those were the scenes. And then, of course, when George cut all that Jabba stuff because he wanted Jabba to be the big puppet that you see and know from the subsequent films. Then he was left with about 10 minutes to film the now iconic sequence that became the scene which informed on Harrison's character and I suppose a bit about Greedo and what he was all about. But I had no idea that scene would even be in the movie, let alone being the 13th most successful scene in movie history, which is some kind of acclaim, I think, for such a short scene.
That's a heck of a claim, really. I didn't know that.
In fact, I keep on telling Harrison he owes his entire career to me because if I'd shot him then, it would have been Greediana Jones and the Screaming Skulls, and it would have been my entire franchise. So I don't know why I didn't shoot him when I had the chance, really.
Sliding doors, things could have been very different. So you've come beyond Star Wars. Obviously, Greedo sadly doesn't make it out of Star Wars. I think one of the novels back in the 90s, he ended up in a stew that Jabba ate. But you hit the convention circuit fairly early. You were one of the first sort of early adopters on that. Yeah. What was that like then, meeting people that you know Star Wars is huge and the original trilogy's come out and the legend of Star Wars is set? And even if nothing had come since, it would still be huge. We'd probably still be here talking about it, even if we'd had nothing since. When did you realise that, wow, you know, this character I filmed for however long it was that you shot for was a bigger deal than I maybe realised it was?
Well, the convention thing and all this, and you guys, was a slow burn, really. I mean, everyone went to see the movies early on and loved them and thought, yeah, fantastic. But the whole convention thing was a very slow burn over about 10 years. So it didn't happen immediately. And I was lucky enough, I'd been in a few TV things in the UK, some of which you're old enough to remember. I was in Coronation Street early on, and even more famous, Crossroads. And so in Crossroads, I had a short brush with fame as the character I played. So you used to get people writing in to the TV studios and saying, can you sign an autograph? And you send it away. But again, the fan convention thing and then coming to huge events, first of all in the States where they were doing The Man Behind the Mask and all those sort of tours, was a very slow burn. But as it sort of gathered pace, we really continued to be shocked, I suppose, by the charm and the the friendliness that Star Wars sort of engaged in people. And what's been lucky for us is that we've grown up with you guys. So I was very young and you were very young when you first saw the film. And we kind of grew up together. And I learnt more from you guys and from my fellow cast members than I ever knew at the time when I was working in the movie, because you do the film and then you're off and away and you're on to your next job as an actor, if you're lucky. So I've learned a great deal from fans, sometimes too much from fans who stand at them. When you did the bit where you raised your fist in the right scene, did you raise your little finger, or was it your... those sort of questions, you know, get a bit tedious after a while, but we learned so much from you guys that it was a real privilege to have that done. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been great meeting you all over the world in similar guises from Japan. And the great thing about Star Wars is that if you mention those two words, Star Wars, in the Arctic or the Antarctic or South America or Asia or Europe, everybody knows what you're talking about, which is quite bizarre. So it's a cultural phenomenon as much as a movie franchise, because everyone's lives have been permeated, for good or for bad, by bits of Star Wars. Everybody knows who and what Jabba the Hutt was. You know, it's referred to in many other elements of life. So, and the same with many of the other things from Star Wars. So we're incredibly fortunate that it was that powerful, I think.
And something, I don't know what it was you said in there that made me think of this question. It's probably the last question, because you probably need to get back to your table. Are you glad that you actually liked Star Wars? Because if you'd have done Star Wars and thought, I'm not, this isn't my bag at all, and then somebody just says, you're leaving silly money on the table by not doing these conventions, and you drag yourself around the world at a show that you're not that keen on. Are you glad that you actually appreciated what you did as a project and the film and everything that came after it?
Oh God, yes. Mrs. Greedo thanks me every day. You know, I mean, she can't wait to get me out to York or wherever it is I'm going to. No, it's been a real privilege and a pleasure. And had it not been so successful, all our lives would have been completely different. I mean, I was very lucky. I did have a great career. I worked more or less wherever I wanted to, and worked in the theatre a lot and in TV and films, and then ran my own theatre down in Dorset for a few years, which was very, very lucky. But the transition from all that to all this has been terrific, and for older actors like me, I'm retired now, I don't work anymore, but to be able to do this still at my age is a real privilege. So thank you guys for coming, and thank you for being so charming and for so loyal as well. It's been a privilege.
Privilege is all ours. Big round of applause for Paul.
Woohoo! Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Right. Brilliant. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.